Caste or jati is an institutionalized structure of oppression. It decides what job a person is worthy of doing, who a person is worthy of marrying, worshipping, and even where a person is worthy of being cremated. Growing up in India, it was impossible to not see caste. But living in the West now, I still see it. According to how castes are divided, Brahmins sit at the top, and Dalits and indigenous peoples of India, also known as Adivasis, are considered lower than the lowest caste groups. This grouping decides accessibility to education, healthcare, welfare, and even societal dignity. A 2018 survey done by US based Ambedkarite organization Equality Labs, 1 in 4 Dalits surveyed reported facing physical and verbal assault, 1 in 3 faced educational discrimination, and 2 in 3 workplace discrimination. The survey also says caste is inherited from the family one is born into and is unalterable throughout that person's life. Today, I speak with the Executive Director of Equality Labs, Thenmozhi Soundararajan. Thenmozhi is a Dalit American transmedia artist and activist. Through her work, she pushes towards ending the oppression of caste apartheid, Islamophobia, white supremacy, and religious intolerance. Thank you for joining me, Thenmozhi, Jai Bhim, and Jai Savitri.
Yes, so nice to be here and so looking forward to us getting into this conversation. So thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Then, Mori, to begin with, there were many talks around Kamala Harris's Brahmin position when she was announced as Joe Biden's vice president. A lot of people were confused as to why her Brahmin identity matters. Some said it doesn't matter because she grew up in the US. Some said it doesn't matter because she's a Baptist. Now that she's in power, tell us how her caste matters for the South Asian community in the US.
So I think what is fundamental for most people to understand is that, wherever South Asians go, they bring caste with them. And it informs so much of the ways that they not only engage with other members of the South Asian community, but it also informs how they fit within the larger racial hierarchies of the places that they have gone and immigrated to. So we see, very challenging dynamics that South Asians play into all across the global diaspora, where we see anti-Dalit mindsets turning into anti-Black mindsets. And so much of how we learn within caste apartheid to be within a pyramid of power where we're basically fighting for our position, making clear that we're aspirational and always wanting to be upward in the pyramid of power, but at the expense of the people below us. And there is a particular dynamic, I think, that comes from that deep, you know, uh, distress and violence and complicity that comes from caste apartheid that we see replicated in the way South Asians engage with other BIPOC communities. And this is why I think when we're looking at South Asian anti-Blackness, for example, we have to look at the ways that brown communities show up as reformist roadblocks, particularly when it comes to those that are, who are directly on the front lines related to police, violence. And this is also why Black and Indigenous folks have had a lot of frustration with South Asian communities who have alliances with Black and Indigenous communities around the harms of white supremacy, but will often use these platforms of diversity and multiculturalism to basically throw these communities under the bus, particularly as it relates to structural violence with relationship to the state and the police. So I think that, when we're talking about Kamala Harris, I think that many of the exchanges that happened between Black and Dalit organizers around the issue of Kamala is that Kamala being on the ticket was a win for Black women and for movements of color around the United States who basically demanded a diverse ticket. And so to have her there is still a celebration for all of the journeys that it took to be able to have that win. That said, there is a legitimate, very, very strong critique of Kamala's role as a prosecutor and what her positions were as a senator with relationship to the issues of police violence, as well as to the issues of caste. And, I think that in a lot of ways, like she is someone who's mixed race and multiracial. And so I think that there are members of the Black community who have had a lot of internal conversations and some external that talk about the kinds of ways that they want to be able to hold Kamala accountable now that she's in power, around the ways that she's going to be looking at institutions of police violence. And Dalit communities are deeply aligned with them in that journey. Um, and I also think that Kamala also has a role in engaging around her Brahminical background. It is very clear. She can never say that she doesn't know that she's not Brahmin because it's in every single one of her bios. Also, when she talks about running for election, she calls her chitti back at home in Basant Nagar to ask the priest to break coconuts for her that are auspicious. I
Mm.
don't think that that's open to every caste. That's very clearly a Brahminical point of access. But also when it comes to brute policy, she was the standing senator in the state of California during the time of the historic, case that the state of California brought towards Cisco related to employment discrimination in the state. She very clearly held Biden to accountability around his lack of silence and lack of position with relation to busing and integration. So she knows what it means to deal with like and address historical wrongs. She also knows what it is to hold a community, a member of a community that's accountable, that has actually benefited from the exploitation of other community members. So as someone who has that level of self-awareness, as someone who is in a role of power in a state that has shown that there's been caste discrimination at multiple levels, she has have the moral courage to do something different. And so I think this is the demand of Dalit communities in the United States is that, of course, the Biden Harris administration is really coming into power at a time which is very fraught, in the United States. So, the battle for caste as a protected category and for Dalits to be able to be part of the whole ecosystem for civil rights is one of many struggles right now as our country fights for a return to democracy. That said, she has a very specific historical engagement with this issue. She also did not say anything when this issue was happening. And so it's important for her to step to the plate and say something now, or again, our communities are going to hold her accountable. And this is, I think, the thing that most people need to understand is that fundamentally, like, we aren't always going to get perfect candidates, but I think we vote the people that we know that we can influence into office. And Harris is accountable to the bases that put her there, and South Asian bases definitely put her there, and caste oppressed voters in that South Asian base definitely were part of that journey. And so to that end, as people who voted for her to get her ticket in, we will be visiting her. We will be talking about our needs, and we will not stop until we get them addressed.
Wonderful. Let me also ask you a little bit about the media in the US and particularly South Asian diaspora media. Because after Hathras, I was noticing a lot of silences among diaspora media outlets, not really digging deep into how caste matters, in sexual assault or rape. So, do you think because Kamala Harris is being a topic, rightfully so, because of Brahminical history, that a conversation around caste and caste oppression particularly in terms of media, will happen in the US? Do you think that this is an opportunity for South Asian diaspora media to talk more about caste and dismantle it?
Well, I think there's a reckoning happening all across the board in terms of South Asian platforms and influencers, where dominant caste influencers and media platforms no longer can afford to be silent about the issue of caste. They're not accurately representing it, but they know if they don't address it, Dalit Twitter is going to have a field day with their nonsense. And I think what's so important to know is that there's so many reasons why there's discomfort with talking about caste. I think particularly for dominant caste journalists and platforms, because to talk about it is to actually put yourself in the realm of subject. When you put yourself in the realm of subject, you also have to look at how am I complicit? And so often in dominant caste media, the way that the issues of caste rape are covered is always through the lens of the caste of the victim. This Dalit girl was raped here. This Dalit girl was raped over there. Massive mob attacks, Dalit family, sexual exploitation of this Dalit family happens, right? But when these stories are covered in that way, we are actually missing the structural lens, which is that what is the caste of the perpetrators? They are thukkars, they are reddis, they are jats, they are gaundars, they are brahmins, they are kshatriyas. But to do that then starts to point to the web of caste privilege and caste networks that actually make up why there's so much impunity related to this violence.
Mm.
And to really have that conversation also gets to a very, very painful truth, which is that so much of dominant caste privilege is actually rooted in caste rape.
Mhm.
Who wants to confront that? Who wants to look at, the fact that the narrative that you've been told as a Brahmin, as a Kshatriya, as a Reddy, as a Jat, or as a Yadav actually has foundations in the continued exploitation and sexual violence of so many Dalit peoples.
Mhm.
That is a horrific thing to look at. And I
Mhm.
think this is actually why I do a lot of thinking about how we are not going to be able to break through the bind of caste supremacy simply through the cerebral practice. And in fact, there is so much trauma around the discussion of caste, not just from the caste oppressed, but within those that are caste privileged. And so I really think that we need to look at multiple modalities to be able to dismantle this system. Because again, there is so much knowledge about the problems of caste. There are numerous reports, there's so many papers, there's symposiums, there's conferences, and yet dominant caste people still rape.
Mhm.
Dominant caste people still lynch.
Mhm.
There are networks of dominant caste people in the diaspora that actually threaten and send death threats and rape threats to Dalits in the diaspora for
Mhm.
simply talking about these issues. So, what is this energy? What is this, complete, utter predatory, violent response to Dalits simply speaking their truth?
Mhm.
And that is not just a cognitive response. It's really at the reptilian level of survival that dominant caste people are so triggered by sharing equitable space with Dalits, because to do that means to acknowledge all that they have denied us for centuries. So the path to reconciliation really is one that has to be multimodal. It has to be one where we're deeply engaged and in tune with each other, but also where there must be restoration. There
Mhm.
must be addressing of harm. There must also be a slowing down of responses, and also an acknowledgement of where also dominant caste people have in turn felt harm from complicity. And
Mhm.
there is harm from complicity because think about it. What does it mean if you've been at a table with other dominant caste people and you are hearing people casually dehumanize someone else? Or you are someone who has witnessed caste violence and you were silent. That too is also violence. And that's actually what the call, to annihilate caste is so deeply rooted in. It is not a diminishment of someone's caste position to release caste. It is actually a reclamation of humanity.
Mhm.
And in many ways, by dropping caste privilege, you regain who you can be and your human potential simply because you are no longer limited by the complicit shackles of caste. And for too long, I think this was really the role of Dalits to do the work of naming caste, addressing the violence. But, at this point in 2021, when we have lost so much, I think it is time for Dalit people to focus on healing, on building, on creating the alternative space for us to know what does it mean for us to exist in relationship as communities that are intercaste and interfaith beyond the parameters of Brahmanism. This is a task that is not to be helmed by dominant caste people. Dominant caste people's work right now is to work to dismantle their own privilege. It is the work for for Dalits and for other caste oppressed peoples to start the experiments for what society looks like beyond this.
Mm.
And in many ways, I'm saying that very intentionally because oftentimes Dalits are asked to do emotional and political and educational labor to help Savarnas through their privilege. That
Mm.
is not necessary at this point. At this point, dominant caste people have all the tools to do it by themselves and to be in accountable and right aligned relationship with Dalit peoples at this time.
Right.
And the choice to not to do that is really the choice to allow caste apartheid to continue. And, every person has to live with how they're going to be judged by the generation that follows. And I know for me, when I think about that, I'm very clear. I am not here to not put my life and every breath towards the destruction of this predatory system
Yeah.
because it is robbed the human potential of hundreds of millions of lives. And
Mhm.
so I am here to fight for life. I am here to fight for love, and I am here to fight for compassion and empathy because these are the pivots that will allow us to regain each other and fundamentally the future.
Mm. Absolutely. Thank you so much for that, Thenmozhi, because a couple of things come to my mind when I was hearing you speak after I interviewed Kiruba after Hathras had happened. And she said that now every TV channel is calling me, every print media wants to talk to me, but no one asked me how I was doing because I was also mourning. So this idea that the Dalit community is there to somehow educate Savarnas is very, very real. And I'm wondering if how do we shift that dynamic, because I think this sense sometimes can be that, oh, I want to listen to the communities, who are at the receiving end of this. I want to hear from them. But what happens most often is we are putting pressure on the particular community to educate us. For example, after BLM, a lot of people were wanting to hear from Black people without realizing that they were putting them under pressure to talk. So, what are the kind of resources that upper caste people, particularly, can turn to rather than people to learn about caste and shift the power?
So I think one of the things that I think that is super important is to recognize that there are lots of things that you can do that doesn't require the labor of a Dalit for
Mm-hmm.
you to be able to unlearn your caste supremacy. The first thing is you can take. We have an unlearning caste supremacy workshop that people can take. We offer it several times a year. You can build community with people there that will then help you be in a cycle of learning all throughout the year, right?
Yeah.
There's also numerous books. If you just look up Caste, annihilate Caste, start
Yeah.
with Dr. Ambedkar's work. There's numerous articles, things to read. Those books are the pathway to begin unlocking it. But I also think, there's a lot to just begin asking questions.
Mm.
Start to locate yourself within the caste paradigm. Look at the ways that people within your caste network perpetuate privilege. What
Mm.
are ways and examples that you've seen yourself be quiet? What are the ways that you feel like you may have contributed to harm? To
Yeah.
start inquiry is so critical. And if you notice, like in all of this, I never say the best response is for you to go on social media and virtue signal. It's because this internal work is not about social media activism where you're broadcasting your learning. There's actually a lot of in depth unlearning you need to do in yourself that requires reflection and contemplative practice that lets you be aware of where your trauma is actually being activated and
Mm.
causing you to actually slam and put up caste barriers and be violent in your exchanges with caste oppressed people.
Mm.
So that's all work that can happen that doesn't require one single tweet, that doesn't require you writing an article, that doesn't require you immediately making yourself an influencer about an issue that you are just beginning to actually explore internally for yourself.
Mhm.
And then I also want to say that this work that is interior, this work that looks at kind of shifting your own mindset and worldview, has to be coupled with action, because so much of dominant caste privilege is linked to direct and immediate actions that are causing harm today. You
Mm,
know, so I always think it's really important. Find a Dalit organization or Ambedkarite organization in your area, volunteer, do service, do donations. You know, at this time there are so many urgent issues because, again, Dalit and caste oppressed communities were some of the most disturbingly hit during COVID. You
mm,
know, we are also in a genocidal context where we saw numerous people being targeted politically. Um, and there's just the ongoing experience of the generational theft of
mm,
our labor, of our resources, of our potential. And
mm.
so being able to think about, you know, caste reparations, whether
Right.
that's in an individual way or in a structural way, that's actually how you can make a difference at this time. So I want people to really think about interior work, to build, you know, co-conspirators and relationships and spaces that allow you to commit to
Mm,
the dismantling of caste, and to critically do action, you know.
mm.
But a lot of Savarna sometimes just stay only in the internal or at the interpersonal. But the action piece is critical because, again, we see so much death, so much rape, so much deprivation, and it's happening right now.
Mm, mm. Yep, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much, Thenmozhi. Everything you said was wonderful, and I hope that people can watch this over and over and over again, and you know, attend your workshops. Definitely read books and indulge into actual intellectual work that can, in turn, turn into structural change. So I'm very, very glad that you joined me, and thank you so much.
Of course. And I just also would want to leave people with this idea that, you know, there's so much love in this work. Because
Yeah.
again, what we're doing is we're reclaiming our humanity.
Mm,
And a lot of times what I hear is that people are afraid. They're afraid of conflict. They're afraid of disrupting these networks of caste privilege. And yet there is no one better suited to do that except themselves.
mhm.
So to take that time to just to be able to get the courage and the strength, there's so much that you have to rework in yourself. And
Yeah.
that's why I think at this time when we are reconsidering everything because of COVID, I mean, think about it. In this year, we started with the genocide, right? We then went to a pandemic, had an uprising, and and then and just an elections that just kind of defies all logic. And
Yeah.
yet, within that, it was movement that pivoted everything and kept the moral compass to allow our peoples to find a way forward. And I
Yeah.
think that's really where, you know, for any Savarna or dominant caste person that's listening here, I really, really want to encourage you to step into this place of moral courage, to try, to learn, to be introspective, and to build community to dismantle caste. Because there are so many things we can do when we are united in this battle. And for Dalits that are listening and other caste oppressed people, I just really want to share with you to have the courage to love yourself and to heal. Like for me, I feel like 2021, even in the face of these dire circumstances, we have to be rooted in Dalit love, in Dalit joy, and Dalit possibility, and the journey to heal. And when we heal, the whole world opens up to us. And I think that's really what we need to really be really clear about, is that, you know, if a Dalit is allowed to be able to be their fullest expression of ourselves, then we have achieved what we want in terms of caste equity. And
Mm.
so it has to begin with us. And so that's my biggest, you know, request to Dalits that are listening. Let's fight for ourselves. Let's hold ourselves. Let us also be warriors, but most importantly, let us be dreamers.
Love that. Thank you so much, Thenmozhi. Thank you. Jai Bhim and Jai Savitri again.
Yes, JB and Jay Savitri. Bye, everybody.